The movie begins with a Japanese man named Keijo, who is a manga artist, and it is shown that he is working on a new project. Keijo tells his wife that he needs to prepare himself to meet the magazine editor whose name is Amura, and that he must impress him with a set of new drawings. Keijo continues working until the next morning, and on his way, we see him standing in front of a man in the subway who seems about to harm himself. Keijo gets excited when he meets the editor, especially when Amura tells him that he is very talented in drawing. At first, he feels happy, but soon becomes disappointed when Amura says that the characters he draws are unrealistic and that people will not like them. He explains to him that as long as he is drawing crime and thriller stories, he needs to choose something realistic that will capture people's interest. He advises him to put in more effort and be realistic so that the audience will believe him. Keijo feels sad and calls his wife to tell her what happened. She tries to encourage him to try again, but he tells her that this is his last attempt. He also informs her that he must find independent work as soon as possible. Later he goes to the team he works with and submits his resignation to Honjo, the team leader. However, Honjo asks him to draw one last expected sketch before leaving the job. After Keijo leaves, one of his colleagues tells the manager that Keijo is a very skilled artist, and that they will truly lose him. But the manager replies that Keijo is too kind-hearted, to the point that he cannot draw real villains in his stories. When Keijo leaves, he rides his bicycle and wanders through the streets until one of the houses catches his attention. He stops in front of it and tries to draw it, but suddenly the door opens. Keijo talks to the person who opened it, explaining that he is not an intruder and that his boss asked him to draw a real house. However, the door is shut in his face before he can finish his words. At that moment, a neighbor opens his window and asks Keijo to lower the music coming from his place. But Keijo replies that it is not from his house, but from the neighbor's, and that he is just a manga artist drawing his neighbor's house. The man then tells him to knock on the door of the house owner, named Avankoshi, and ask him to turn down the music. Otherwise he will call the police and report him. Keijo tries to call out to anyone from the Fankushi family, but no one responds. He decides to enter the house without permission, and the moment he steps inside, he is shocked to find the entire Fankushi family murdered and tied to the dining chairs. Keijo collapses to the ground in shock, and his fear intensifies when he realizes that his hand is soaked in blood. Suddenly he sees a teenage boy emerging from the house, his face covered in blood, and Keijo immediately understands that this boy is the one who slaughtered the entire family. Soon after the police arrive at the house and secure the crime scene, one of the forensic officers informs Detective Kamaru and his colleague that the murder weapon was most likely a sharp knife, before resuming his work. At that moment, a police officer named Makabe appears and tells Kamaru that Detective Saida will be joining the investigation team. Kamaru warns him to be cautious, as Saida sometimes loses control. Suddenly, Detective Saida arrives and assures Kamaru that he is not out of control. He then accompanies Makabe to the police station to interrogate Keijo, as he is the sole witness to the crime. When Saida sits in front of Keijo, he asks him why he was standing in front of the Fankushi residence in particular. Keijo explains that he is a manga assistant, and that his supervisor, Honjo, asked him to sketch a real house, so he wandered around the streets and happened to choose the Fankushi home. When Saida asks him why he entered the house, Keijo replies that he went inside at the request of a neighbor who had complained about loud noises coming from the Fankushi home, so he felt obliged to check and warn them. Finally, Saida takes Keijo's sketchbook and, upon seeing the numerous detailed drawings, is impressed by his remarkable talent. He asks Keijo whether he had seen the killer's face and tried to draw it, but Keijo lies and denies it, claiming that he could not see him. Afterwards, Saida verifies Keijo's statements and tells his superior, Makabe, that he visited Honjo, Keijo's supervisor, who confirmed that Keijo was at work during the time the forensic report determined the crime had taken place. That night, Keijo returns home, sits in his studio, and begins sketching all the details he remembers about the crime, filled with excitement by everything he had witnessed at the Fankushi residence. The next day, Makabe stands before the court and presents the details of the crime, stating that the deranged killer murdered Fankushi, his wife, son, and daughter, tied them to the dining chairs, and then spent some time with them after committing the atrocity. He adds that the investigation will continue, and that they are certain the crime was committed out of revenge. The police then begin searching through old criminal records and grow suspicious of a man named Hinami, who had committed a similar crime 34 years earlier. When Hinami is arrested and interrogated, he confesses easily, but he provides no details to Detective Saida, leading him to suspect that Hinami is lying. Later, when Saida speaks with his superior Makabe, he learns that both Makabe and Kamaru have already considered the case closed, given Hinami's confession. Meanwhile, Kaijo watches the news and realizes that the police have arrested the wrong man. Then Keigo returns to his studio and draws the real killer he had personally seen at the crime scene. Strangely, he still refuses to inform the police about the truth, allowing the murderer to remain free. Later we see the killer stopping a car carrying a family of 4, a father, mother, son and daughter, and asking them for a ride. While talking to them, he confesses that he loves families of 4 members, as in his view, they represent the perfect family. After a while, the mother senses that he is odd and becomes afraid of him. But before she can act, the killer pulls out a knife and stabs them all to death, causing the car to overturn. When Inspector Saida arrives at the crime scene and searches the car, he easily finds the knife this time. Detective Makabe, surprised at how quickly Saida discovered it hidden in the car's ceiling, asks him how he managed to find it so fast. Saida then hands him a manga book and tells him to read it, revealing that the killer in the series only murders families of all 4. As Makabe reads, he is shocked to find a case almost identical to the one they are currently investigating. When he asks Saida about the author, he learns that it is Keigo, the only witness to the Fonkoshi family murder. Together, they begin uncovering the crimes illustrated in the manga, and soon they find another case drawn exactly like the Fonkoshi family's murder. At this point, Inspector Saida decides to meet Keigo once again. Makabe reflects that they had made a mistake when they believed Hinama's confession, as he was just a cowardly, unstable man willing to say anything he was told. Meanwhile, Keigo is with his wife and relatives when his editor Amura calls, informing him that 2 detectives want to meet him. A meeting is then arranged. Later we see Amura traveling with Makabe and Saida. Along the way, Makabe is curious about Keigo's income. Amura explains that if Keigo publishes 4 manga volumes per year, he would earn about 100 million yen. When they arrive at Keigo's house, his wife welcomes them and leads them to his studio. There, Saida questions Keigo about the Fonkoshi murder and the most recent Mountain Road incident. He shows him a real crime scene photo alongside an illustration from his manga. The similarity is undeniable, but Keigo insists that it is merely a fictional character of his creation, a serial killer from his imagination with no basis in reality. Though unconvinced, Saida ends the meeting and leaves. After they depart, Amura warns Keigo that this story might cause them serious problems and asks him to end the Dagger series. Keigo promises to do so after completing the current story. That night, Keigo goes to a bar near his home, only to unexpectedly encounter Inspector Saida. Surprised, he asks if Saida is following him, but Saida claims it is only coincidence and assures him that he does not bother himself with cases outside of working hours. He then begins discussing Keigo's life, stories, and manga works, remarking how realistic they are since Keigo does not always allow good to triumph over evil, unlike most authors. Saida gives Keigo his phone number, asking him to call if he ever faces any problem, emphasizing that his work is all about seeking the truth. Suddenly, Saida's superior, Makabe, calls him asking where he is. Saida replies that he is drinking alone, but Makabe sternly warns him not to act independently or watch Keigo without permission. Meanwhile, the killer approaches Keigo and introduces himself, saying that he reads and admires his manga deeply. He tells him his name is Murazumi, but that he especially loves Dagger, Keigo's protagonist, as he feels the character resembles him greatly. He explains that he relates to Dagger's emotions, and that is why he reenacts everything in the stories. At this moment, Keigo grows anxious, realizing that he has been helping Murazumi commit murders by providing him with scenarios in his manga. When he returns home, he blames himself for having drawn the Fonkoshi murder in the first place. The next day, he goes to Makabe and Saida, informing them that forensic analysis revealed the knife used in the most recent family murder was the same weapon used to kill the Fonkoshi family. Saida, unsurprised, shows him the latest manga volume published by Keigo. At that moment, Makabe realizes that Hinimi is innocent and that he had been imprisoned unjustly. Afterwards, he goes to his superior and Komaru to discuss releasing Hinimi. They listen to him, then decide to officially declare his innocence. During the press conference, Hinimi tells the journalist that he made a mistake by confessing to the crime, only to relieve himself from the pressure of police interrogations. However, the reporters embarrass him by asking whether he will demand compensation from the police, given that he was wrongfully imprisoned at the age of 16. Hinimi responds that he cannot remember anything clearly, and he doubts that he was truly a criminal who committed the crime that sent him to prison at such a young age. At this point, we understand that Hinimi is mentally unstable, ready to confess to any crime, and even willing to be punished for it, whether or not he actually committed it. When he goes to Murazumi, we see him searching for a new family of 4. As soon as he finds the suitable family, he commits his crime immediately. By the time the police arrive, it is too late, for Murazumi has already carried out the murders and escaped. At the crime scene, Detective Makabe finds the 4 corpses lying side by side, the blood soaking the place as usual. Meanwhile, Detective Seda holds the manga volumes drawn by Keigo, trying to find a resemblance between the crime and Keigo's stories. When he tries to call him, he does not answer, so he resorts to calling the editor Amuro to ask about him. Amuro advises him to search for Keigo at the bar he usually frequents, but when he arrives, Keigo is nowhere to be found. Upon asking the bar owner, he learns that Keigo had not come that day. At that moment, Seda notices a sketch of the character Digger and asks about it. The bar owner tells him that he does not read Keigo's stories at all, and hands him the paper, saying it was drawn by a man who had been sitting next to him. When Seda asks about the time it was drawn, the owner replies that it was the very same day Keigo had come to the bar, exactly when Amuro was at Keigo's studio, collecting his latest manuscript for publication. Deep down, Amuro felt happy because it meant more sales, even though he deliberately pretended to be worried about the police investigations. The next day, Keigo takes his wife to the doctor, who asks her to commit to regular checkups for her and the baby's safety. After she leaves, she finds her husband waiting for her outside, though he seems distracted and not truly concerned about her or the pregnancy. When she approaches him, he apologizes, saying they have not sat together and talked in a long time, and promises to make it up to her. She replies that she understands the difficult situation he is going through, and urges him to take care of himself. She then asks whether he would prefer a boy or a girl. Keigo asks her if she already knows the baby's gender. She admits she does, but wants to surprise him. At that very moment, Murazumi appears, telling Keigo that he read his latest story and enjoyed it, especially the detail of the knife used to kill the 2 families. This, of course, makes Keigo anxious and uneasy. His wife steps in, thanking Murazumi for supporting her husband, to which Murazumi replies that he considers himself Keigo's advisor, since Keigo constantly relies on him for inspiration and ideas. Then Natsumi, Keigo's wife, asks if what Murazumi said is true. Before Keigo can answer, Murazumi notices that Natsumi is pregnant, congratulates her, and remarks that children are symbols of happiness. That is why he has bought a baby crib. Finally, Keigo decided to take Natsumi with him, so they got into their car and drove away. On the way, Natsumi asked him about Mazumi, telling him that he was eccentric and frightening. He told her that he was forced to stop the stories he was currently publishing, and confessed everything that had happened since the night the Funakoshi family was murdered. He revealed that Mazumi had become the serial killer, and that he had seen him with his own eyes, foolishly entering his house and stumbling upon him by accident. From that day on, Mazumi turned into a character from the manga he was drawing, imitating the crimes depicted in the stories exactly. In short, he committed all the crimes that Dagger did in the stories. At that moment, Keigo promised Natsumi that he must reveal the whole truth to Detective Seada. Indeed, as soon as he returned home, he called Detective Seida, met him at his house, and told him everything. He explained that Dagger was the same serial killer they were hunting, who had previously introduced himself under the name Mazumi. The detective wrote down all the information Keigo confessed to him and then left. Afterward, Natsumi tried to pull Keigo out of the state of depression and remorse that had overtaken him. She told him that despite everything, he was a talented manga artist, and that he could begin a new series completely detached from Dagger and Mazumi. But Keigo told her that if he stopped publishing Dagger's stories, they would not be able to afford the rent for the luxurious house they were living in. His wife then said that the house was far too big for them, and that it would be better to move into a smaller apartment. He responded that he had another problem. He must confess everything to his family, a step that required both courage and bravery. The next day, Keigo went to the newspaper and asked the editor Amaru and their chief to stop publishing the stories. They told him that it was a difficult decision and that he had to think carefully before making it. They suggested he take a break so that he could think calmly and make the right choice. Meanwhile, all the police officers were gathered, trying to lay out a solid plan to capture Marzumi. Later, Marzumi confronted Keigo at a bookstore because he wanted to stop the manga series. Keigo told him that he had made a final decision and that he had already informed the police of everything, even giving them his name and recounting the first time he saw him committing murder. Marzumi laughed and told him that he killed people just like in the manga drawings, and that surely Keigo enjoyed killing them too, which meant they were no different from one another. Before leaving, Marzumi asked him to write one last story, giving him the chance to commit one last crime for them both to enjoy. Keigo then decided to call Detective Seida and informed him that Marzumi had met him at the bookstore. Seida promised to review the surveillance footage as soon as possible to better recognize Marzumi's face and arrest him. At that moment, one of the officers discovered new information about Marzumi and told Makabe that he had found someone by that name working as a delivery man. They also learned that he had been near the Funakoshi residence at the time of the murder. He even showed Makabe photos Keigo had drawn of the house in Konshi, in which a truck belonging to a delivery company appeared. They quickly went to that company and requested Marzumi's resume. Meanwhile, Marzumi, feeling extremely upset, returned home, expressed his anger, grabbed a manga book Keigo had drawn and written, and told himself that he would continue even if Keigo stopped publishing new installments of the series. As for the police, they went to Marzumi's address, which they had obtained from his resume, and there they met his mother. They asked her about him, but she told them he had been absent from home for 10 years, and that many people had come asking about him, most of them being creditors. She said that ever since he injured his leg, he had become a desperate man, ready to do anything. At that moment, Detective Seida asked her to show them a picture of the person she was talking about, so they could make sure they were looking for the right man. She returned with a photograph of Marzumi, but when they looked at it, they noticed that he looked completely different from the way Keigo depicted him in his stories. Meanwhile, Marzumi was standing near the home of a new family of 4. Excited, he grabbed his knife and decided to enter the house and kill them. After murdering them, he sat on a chair beside them to rest, then later photographed them with his camera, delighted that he could continue what he had started. That night, Detective Makabe told Detective Seida that the case had become very difficult for them, and asked whether he still trusted Keigo. Seida replied that Keigo was their last hope to catch Marzumi, but Makabe reminded him that Keigo had lied to them at the beginning of the investigation, and they needed to be cautious in dealing with him. And when Detective Seida sat alone reviewing the surveillance camera recordings at the bookstore, he saw Marzumi and realized that he was the true killer. He compared his real photo with one of Keijo's drawings and noticed a sign that appeared in one of the crime scene pictures he had committed. He then began using the word written on the sign to search on the internet, trying to understand any clue from the results. Meanwhile, Marzumi returned home, took out the knife he had used to kill his latest victim, and placed it on the table as if it was something ordinary he repeated every day. He then arranged the photos of the 4 new victims beside those of the older ones, and fell asleep on the floor from exhaustion. Afterwards, Detective Seida spoke with Keijo and asked him why he chose the idea of killing a family of 4. Keijo told him that he had been inspired by the murder Marzumi committed that night in Konshi. They discovered that there was a village abandoned in 1989, which once had 20 families, each consisting of 4 members, and that this number was considered a symbol of happiness for them. It was highly likely that Marzumi belonged to one of those families. But Seida looked at the pictures of the family killed on the mountain road and told Keijo that there were thousands of families living along mountain paths, and surely among them would be families of 4 members. That is why the murders would never stop unless they succeeded in capturing him. When Detective Seida left Keijo's house, Detective Makabe called him and informed him that another family of 4 had been murdered. Seida asked him for the address and whether this family belonged to a community that considered the number 4 a symbol of happiness. But Makabe did not understand what he meant. Seida replied that he would explain everything to him once they met. Suddenly, Saida heard a voice from above the bridge saying that he had reached a very advanced stage in the investigation. At that moment, Hanam attacked Saida and stabbed him in the stomach with a knife. Saida tried to defend himself, but Hanam overpowered him and killed him. After he fell to the ground, he stabbed him with the knife several more times to make sure he was dead, laughing like a madman while doing so. Then it was revealed that the person who had been speaking to Saida from above the bridge was none other than Mazumi himself, the man Detective Saida had been searching for. The next day, the police discovered that Hanam was the one who attacked and killed Detective Saida, as he appeared clearly in the surveillance cameras. Thus, Mazumi had succeeded in his plan, distracting the police and diverting their attention away from him. At Detective Saida's funeral, Detective Makabe noticed that Kaijo had come to attend and offer condolences. He advised him to return home quickly, since being outside was dangerous for his life. But Kaijo, concerned about what happened to Saida, asked Makabe if he suspected Hanam had an accomplice. Kaijo told him he was certain, not just suspicious. Makabe replied that in any case they were searching for Hanam and would capture him soon. He pointed to Saida's grandmother, telling him she was the only surviving member of his family. Kaijo then learned that Saida had grown up in orphanages, yet had become a decent and upright man, even though he could have surrendered to his circumstances and turned out disturbed like Hanam or Mazumi. Before leaving, Makabe advised Kaijo to return to drawing manga. He told him that Mazumi admired him, was surely waiting for his new series, and that they might be able to capture him through it. Immediately, Kaijo returned to his home and studio, determined to draw the final chapter of his series, giving Digger, or Mazumi, another chance to kill, but intending to turn it into a trap to help the police catch him. When the news reached the newspaper, the publishing manager was thrilled and told the editor Amaru that this was their last hope to raise sales again. That night, Kaijo stayed up working on the final chapter of the series, depicting Mazumi engaging in his favorite pastime. Once he had finished a large part of the chapter, he brought it to his wife Natsumi to hear her opinion. The next day, Kaijo took the final chapter to the newspaper and handed it to the editor for publication. When Detective Makabe heard about it, he obtained a copy and presented it to his superior, Deputy Komaru. After reading it, Komaru told him that the killer could never be foolish enough to appear before them the way Keijo had written in the last chapter. He added that Keijo was exposing himself to danger and making himself and his family targets for the killer. Makabe pleaded with him to approve the publication, insisting this was the only way they could capture Mazumi. When Mazumi received the final chapter, he read it with joy and began planning how he would carry out the last murder in the Digger series. Later, Detective Makabe warned Keijo not to use his family as bait for the hunter Mazumi, but Keijo insisted that they had to do it in order to catch him and stop the murders. Keijo then gathered with his father, mother and brother, making them 4 people, the perfect number to lure Mazumi to commit his repeated crime. But while they were waiting for him, the police were shocked to learn that Mazumi had appeared somewhere else. At the same time, Mazumi called Keijo and told him that he was not convinced by the family he was with, as he felt Keijo did not love his parents enough to make them a truly happy family. So although they were indeed 4 members, they lacked happiness. Therefore, he would choose another family of 4, one that was truly happy. Keijo immediately suspected that Mazumi was targeting his own family. He called his wife Natsumi and asked why she had hidden the gender of the baby from him. She revealed that she was pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl, and had wanted to share the news at the right moment to delight him. At that instant, Keijo realized that Mazumi was now targeting his family. He quickly called Detective Makabe to inform him, then rushed to his home to save his wife and the unborn twins. As soon as he tried to open the door, Mazumi ambushed him from behind, stabbing him in the hand and then in the stomach. At that moment, Natsumi heard his screams and ran outside to find him lying on the ground, bleeding heavily. She rushed to him in tears. Meanwhile, Mazumi entered Keijo's studio, examined the drawings and illustrations with admiration, and asked Keijo to get up and turn on the digital screen he used for drawing. Barely alive, Keijo urged Natsumi to run away quickly, but she was paralyzed with fear, crying for him. At the same time, he powered on the screen for Mazumi to distract him from his wife, but Mazumi did not forget and went after her to kill her. He stabbed her once, and at that moment, Keijo cried out and begged him to kill him first, reminding him of the final chapter he had published, where it was written that he should die first. Mazumi turned toward him to kill him, but the knife slipped from his hand. Kaijo seized it and stabbed him. Mazumi tried to defend himself, but Kaijo managed to overpower him and stabbed him again. Before he could stab him a third time, Detective Makabe arrived. Later, Mazumi was treated and brought to court, where the judge asked him to state his name and residence. The prosecutor then explained that Mazumi had grown up without a family, had stolen another man's identity and lived under it. He added that Mazumi was mentally disturbed and diagnosed with sexual sadism. At that time, Keijo was in the hospital, where his wife Natsumi had given birth to twins. After some time, she took the two babies and left, while someone was watching them. When Detective Makabe visited Kaijo, he found neither Natsumi nor the children, but discovered a draft sketch beside him. At the end of Mazumi's trial, the judge asked him, "If you were in my place, would you sentence your own son?" The court was astonished when Mazumi replied by asking the judge, "Do you even know who I really am?"